You're in front of the TV.
Congrats to the Eagles on winning the Super Bowl, but for me, the night was all about This Is Us and the real reveal of how Jack died. So let's break down Season 2, Episode 14, right here on What Happened. Hey, you lovely people, Lisa here, and I am hoping that you've recovered from the most tear-inducing episode, I think, of This Is Us to date. Like, seriously, there should be a way for TVs to dispense tissues magically during these episodes. Per usual, the whole cast was brilliant, but holy cow, there were just two performances that really stood out to me, and that was Mandy Moore, who gave such an emotional performance. She was just fantastic, and then Justin Hartley, especially in that scene with Kevin talking to Jack at the tree. Definitely, those two need more award love next season. I know usually the other three get it, but those two are very deserving as well. Now, this episode, of course, addressed the specifics of how Jack died, and we finally revisit all that drama with Tess and learn what's going on with her, which produces our big twist for this episode. Now, you're all here to discuss Jack's death, right? So let's get straight down to that. The short version: Jack didn't die exactly in the fire, but from the results of the fire. He died of cardiac arrest from smoke inhalation, in other words, a heart attack. Now for the longer version. Last episode we saw young Jack and pregnant Rebecca in their newish home gifted a crock pot from an elderly neighbor named George, and of course, automatically all the blame went to George and that crock pot for Jack's death. So much so that they literally, NBC went and made some like Jack crockpot apology thing, like don't blame the crockpot thing with Milo. It was pretty clever. Anyway, George gave them a crockpot, which he said you have to fiddle with the switch a little, and Jack and Rebecca happily took it and used it, and that stinking thing waited a total of 17 years to finally have that switch actually act up, causing the Pearson household to go up in flames on Jack's favorite day, Super Bowl Sunday. Now, apparently hearing that you have to fiddle with a switch for something that's a crock pot that you leave on for hours at a time did not send a red flag to young Jack and Rebecca, because I guess when you're young and starting a new family and strapped for cash, you'll happily accept any gift that helps cook food, right? Well, note here, if anybody offers you a used car and says the brakes work, but you kind of have to fiddle with them, don't accept it, guys. Now, this week's episode picks right up where we left off with the fire engulfing the house. Jack wakes up in the middle of the night to get a drink of water and notices the smoke seeping in through the door. He immediately wakes up Rebecca, Randall, and Kate. And now we've seen Milo play a superhero of sorts on NBC's Heroes before, but Jack Pearson, I think, is his best superhero role to date. Jack's able to get Randall and Kate from their bedrooms to the master bedroom without getting burned up, and he gets that whole family out of the house from the second story and onto safe ground. Now, reminder here, Kevin is over at Sophie's and they snuck out to some party in the woods and no one's really able to get a hold of him. Now, as it's Jack's turn to jump from the roof to safety, Kate hears their dog Louie barking and panics, calling out for him because Louie is still inside the house. Jack honestly just takes a look at Kate and sees how devastated she is, and he tells the doctor later he really loves the girl that loves that dog and he hated seeing her so upset, so he goes back into the burning house to save the dog, and it seems like he is gone for like an hour as Kate, Randall, and Rebecca wait outside to see if he's gonna come out of that house alive or not. Well, Jack finally does, and he not only has Louie alive, but also managed to get a bag full of things that he thought were important, like photo albums, Rebecca's necklace, and the video he filmed of Kate singing her audition song for college. Yeah, Jack is not real, right? Do guys like him exist in real life? Because if so, I need one. Rebecca sent Kate and Randall to Miguel's, where Randall's girlfriend Allison bought them some clean clothes. Jack and Rebecca headed to the hospital where Jack got his burns treated and wrapped up, but the doctor did emphasize that he took in a lot of smoke and they still should run some tests on him, even though all signs seemed to be pointing to Jack being okay. Since things seemed okay, Rebecca decided it was time for a break to go make some calls to the hotel and the kids and to the vending machine to get a snack, while Jack caught up on the rest of the Super Bowl highlights that he missed on the TV. And as Rebecca is trying to choose what snack she wants, just a note here, Jack said he'd like anything that wasn't chocolate or grape. But sadly, that's all that was in the machine, which already gives some kind of ominous tone that makes it feel like something's gotta go wrong. We hear kind of machines going off in the background and hospital personnel running to a room, and it's apparent that someone is crashing. And yes, unfortunately, that person is Jack. When the doctor comes to get Rebecca to tell her Jack died from cardiac arrest due to smoke inhalation, she thinks he's joking and actually has her mistaken for someone else, and even reacts by just taking a bite out of her candy bar like nothing is wrong. She is so in denial that she even gets up and goes towards Jack's room, calling out to him, talking to him like, hey, you'll never guess what's going on. And then she sees his body, and the realization just sets in, and Mandy delivers one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've seen on TV this year so far. Granted, we're only in February. Rebecca finally gets herself together and goes to Miguel's and tells him what happened outside, and then she puts on her strong face to go inside and tell Kate and Randall. She then says she needs a few minutes, and she escapes and drives and sits outside the burned down house. She then grabs the bag of important things Jack saved from the fire and realizes that he saved her moon necklace, which she puts on, which we now understand why she has such a hard time taking that necklace off, which she told Kevin previously. Meanwhile, Kate goes and finds Kevin, who's sleeping in the woods with Sophie, and fills him in. So there you have it. Jack died from a heart attack as a result of all the smoke inhalation from the fire. We now know why Kate really blames herself for Jack's death. It was because he went back in to save her dog, and you know, if she hadn't cried out for Louie the dog, he probably would have hopped down to safety. Granted, Jack also chose to stay in there longer than he needed to in order to grab all the stuff that he thought was important. So I don't think it all falls on Kate, but I get why she blames herself for everything. Now, Jack's cause of death is heartbreaking, but what made everything more devastating was just how he handled it leading up to that death, and how also Rebecca reacted, and how that whole scene played out with her being in denial about it. Now, in the hospital room after the doctor leaves and Jack and Rebecca are sitting there, it seems like Jack kind of knew something was off with him just from the way he was acting. As Rebecca was leaving the room, he called out for her, and he was definitely seemed like he was about to say something, maybe something heavy, or that he loved her, but instead he chose to say a joke, saying she was blocking the TV. And then we see her leave the room and he smiles, but then his face just kind of changes and he hangs his head down low. And I feel like he knew something bad was going to happen, but he didn't want to leave Rebecca with a bad image in her head. So he left Rebecca with the last image of him being them smiling together and joking, because it would have been pretty devastating for Rebecca if the last thing she saw was them getting in a fight or him just being really upset and sad. Now, all that pretty much wraps up Jack's death and the flashback storyline. So in the present day, we get to see how each of the Pearsons handle that Super Bowl Sunday in a different way. Kevin usually avoids the day, Kate wallows, Randall celebrates, and Rebecca makes Jack's favorite lasagna and watches the game while waiting for kind of a laugh or a sign from Jack. Now, Kate wallows because she of course blames herself for Jack's death. Now, this year is a little different though, because she finally lets Toby in. Kate pulls out that old VHS tape that Jack saved from the fire of her singing and watches it, and Toby's pretty impressed because he's like, I've never seen this before, and I didn't know you wrote songs and all of this. And she bluntly tells him that it's from the day her house burned down and her father died, and that's why she's never really talked about it, and Toby immediately gets what's going on. Now, of course, something else has to go wrong because this is us, right? So the VCR actually starts to eat up that VHS tape, which freaks Kate out because that's literally like the only thing she has left from her dad. Thankfully, Toby has a guy that knows VCRs, and Kate is really set on getting that physical tape back and working, even though Toby's like, hey, the guy can probably save it and put it in the cloud. Luckily for Kate, that guy works his magic, her tape is saved, but just in case, he also puts it in the cloud for her. Kate then tells Toby a story about a leaky window in her room that Jack would always fix, and how he was patient, steady, and never gave up on that window. She explains how she at first thought her family couldn't come back from Jack's death because it was so devastating. Then she thought the rest of her family could because they were stronger than her, but she might not. And for 20 years, she thought very little of herself until she met somebody named Toby, who reminds her a lot of Jack, because she says just like Jack, Toby never gave up on her. He believed in her, and he saw the best in her, and then she kind of gives him the best compliment ever.
Do you know that you changed my life? That you saved my life? And oh my God, he would have loved you.
I really do think Jack would have loved Toby too, and I'm kind of sad that we don't get to see Toby and Jack interact, because I think they would totally bro it out, man. But I'm finally glad that Kate has let Toby inside those walls that she has built up for so long, because we've seen Toby try before and she's always shut him down, but this time she gladly let him in. Now for Kevin and Rebecca. Rebecca tells Kevin she usually spends the day making Jack's favorite lasagna, eating it, and watching the game. And even though it's the saddest day of the year for her, Jack somehow always manages to send her a sign that makes her laugh, much like how their last interaction was Jack making a joke. Kevin, on the other hand, usually spends the day blacked out drunk hooking up with models. Yeah, pretty different ways to handle that, right? Well, Rebecca invites Kevin to join her, but he declines and instead goes to Jack's tree, a place he hasn't been since the funeral. He's inspired to go there after looking through a little box of things that Jack must have saved when he was grabbing all that stuff, which has old birthday cards from the Big Three in it and Jack's 6-month sobriety chip. Now, if you remember, the last name on Kevin's list of amends was Jack, and he finally gets to that in this episode. At the tree, Kevin has to talk with Jack he's been putting off for like 20 years. He tells Jack he's sorry for not being there that night and for saying such awful things to him the last time they saw each other. Kevin essentially says he knows that he's probably disappointed Jack with the man that he's become, but he doesn't handle things as well as Jack, and he's going to try though, and he's going through some of the same things Jack did, and now he's determined to make Jack proud of him no matter how long it takes, and he's going to make his life better. He then ends the conversation on a lighter note, telling Jack that he did a movie with Rocky, which I think would have made Jack pretty proud. Now when Kevin calls in to check on Rebecca, he asks if Jack sent her that laugh for the day yet, and she says no, that Jack must have gotten busy. Kevin then thanks Rebecca for being so strong for them back in the day, and she tells him about the moment she found out that Jack had died and the whole candy bar situation which haunts her. Now when Rebecca asks where Kevin is, he says he's at Dad's tree, but then he kind of jokes saying that he doesn't know if he's even at the right tree, which totally gets a laugh from both of them. And it seems like Jack sent Rebecca her laugh after all in the form of Kevin. Well played, Jack. Well played. And then we see Kevin return and watch the game with Rebecca. Now for Randall and that twist with Tess. Since the Super Bowl is Jack's favorite day, Randall chooses to celebrate and throw a huge party, proving he is pretty much the snack king. But he's also throwing a party for a bunch of kids that are Tess and Annie's friends that really don't care about the Super Bowl. They care more about the Puppy Bowl. Now during the party, Annie's new lizard, Mr. McGiggles, gets out of his cage and ends up, well, dead courtesy of Beth stepping on him. Randall's chipper attitude and the realization of the actual day finally starts to set in as he delivers a eulogy for the little lizard. And things start to get a little intense, but Beth swoops in to save the day and switch the attention to the Puppy Bowl. Meanwhile though, Tess has left the room and gone upstairs, and Randall finally notices that something's wrong with Tess. He goes to talk to her and she reveals that she's been taking the landline off the hook since the social workers only call the landline. It's not that she doesn't want them to foster another kid, she actually thinks that fostering is cool. She feels that Randall wants a new life since he went and found William, then got Deja, then got a new job, and it seems like he's kind of not paying as much attention to Tess and Annie. Randall realizes what's going on and he explains to her how amazing a dad her grandpa Jack was, and how he was worried that he couldn't be as good a dad as Jack, and how he was worried when Tess came along. But when she did, she changed his whole world and made his life somersault, and that she will always be Randall's number one. He tells her that even if they get another foster kid tomorrow, nothing is going to change that. And she's going to live with them until she's 25, and even when she's a grown-ass adult, she's going to have dinner with him once a week and tell him everything. And you know what? Tess actually says, cool, that's alright, I'll do that. Well, does Tess actually keep that promise? We actually learn the answer in this episode's twist. Now remember back, I think it was in the Randall-centric episode before winter break, we saw a little boy in a social worker's office. Well, that little boy appears again in this episode, and we see a social worker tell him that there's a foster family for him. This is intercut with Beth receiving a phone call, and it sounds like it could be from a social worker and that there's someone there to see them, like there's a kid available right now. Now all signs seem to be pointing to Randall and Beth getting this little boy. Well, think again. We see the social worker introduce the boy to a young couple, and it's actually a white couple, so it's definitely not Randall and Beth. But then we hear a co-worker tell the social worker that her dad is here for dinner, and in walks older Randall. And yes, that social worker with the little boy was Tess. Tess said that the fostering was cool, and it seems like all the fostering they did as a family with her growing up really had such an impact on her that she grew up to be a social worker. And she also kept her deal with Randall to have dinner with him weekly. So then if that was in the future, who called the landline and talked to Beth? Well, we see that it's Deja on their doorstep. Now we don't actually get to hear what Deja is telling Randall and Beth, but it seems like something has happened and she's there for a reason. Now whether or not it's because her mom relapsed or got in trouble again, We will have to wait to find out. But Tess actually watches Randall and Beth talking to Deja, and she returns to her room with a little smile on her face. And there you have it. Jack died from a heart attack. Kevin had the talk he's been waiting to have with Jack for 20 years. Kate finally let Toby in on the guilt that she's been holding in for 20 years. Randall and Tess patched up their relationship. Deja may be back, and Rebecca got her laugh from Jack in the form of Kevin, which is actually the sweetest thing because it shows that I think the bond is being repaired between Kevin and Rebecca, and Jack is just sending a sign to say, you guys are doing good, I feel like. Also, Kate and Kevin both had big breakthroughs this episode, and I won't lie, I usually don't find their characters super likable, but I think most of that and how they acted is due to what they've held on to with Jack, with that guilt and all of that kind of stuff. So now that they've both kind of let that air out a little, I'm hoping to see their characters progress in a happy way and become more likable. Ultimately though, this was one of the best episodes I think of the show so far. I think it could have easily been a letdown with all the hype there was about, Jack's reveal and his death and all of this. But it played out so well with so many great performances, and there were a lot of tears shed. But I also gotta give a shout out to some of the more lighthearted moments as well.
How come I've never heard you, sing it?
Because this is the day that my house burned down and that my father died.
Gotcha. I will shush now. Try this.
Right? Huh? Oh, man. Okay, that's good.
That's how Randall rolls.
Oh, so third person Randall's coming to the party too today?
Yup.
I'm gonna go in the kitchen and get that, and I'm never coming back.
What are you... Come...
I'm not sure I'm at the right tree.
You just have to have moments like this to balance out those heavy moments. Otherwise, I think we'd all be too exhausted to keep watching the show episode after episode. Now we're left to wonder just how the show will carry on now that they've had their big reveal. So let's watch the promo for the next episode.
Tuesday, a family story continues.
You were gonna live forever.
With the enduring power of a father's love.
I don't understand how he died.
As parents, we talk a lot about what we want for our kids. I want my kids to be okay. I want my family to be okay.
And a visit from an old friend.
Hello, Rebecca.
That wraps up this week's first recap of This Is Us for the week. We have another episode coming in just a few days, but until then, hit the comments down below. Let me know what you thought about this reveal about Jack's death. Did you see that twist with Tess coming? How do you think that will influence the Tess that we see as a kid going forward? Also, let me know your favorite moments from this episode and least favorite moments from this episode. After that, you can click right over here to watch some videos about the pop culture things that are turning 10 years old this year. That's right, if you love nostalgia, let's go feel old together, right? Thanks so much for watching. As always, my name is Lisa, and I'll see you in a few days with another This Is Us recap.